Hello, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank the organization committee for this opportunity. I'm a first-year PhD student working with Serena Vitti and Frank Vigil at the Galactic Institute in Bonn. And I will present the methodology and the preliminary results of the multi-species non-LTE modeling of W49A. So we already heard great things now about this source, but just as a quick motivation, the formation of massive stars is enriching the ISM in multiple ways, like considering the chemistry and the energy. So it's really a great laboratory, so to speak, to compare or to look at these massive star-forming regions in the Milky Way to go from basically bridging the gap of our understanding from star formation in the Milky Way to the unresolved starbursts in nearby galaxies. And this work focuses, as I just said, on W49A, which you can see here as on the galactic plane in a free color image using the Spitzer 8 micron for blue, 24 micron for green, and Herschel 250 micron in red. And on the right, you can see the zoom in, which you already saw before. So just very quickly, here we can see the W49A star forming region together with the W49B supernova remnant in a 100 times 100 roughly parsec view from LEGO. W49A is one of the most luminous massive star-forming regions we have in the Milky Way, making it so interesting to study. This work is based on the 3 millimeter data that we already heard about from LEGO, from the LEGO survey, which was already introduced in great detail by Jens Kaufmann and Lukas Neumann before. And in this project, we complement these data with apex observations, which were conducted with a PI 230 receiver targeting higher J transitions of the same molecules. So these were conducted in 2019 under the PI of Ashley Barnes. So, for example, we have the 2-to-1 transitions of CO, 13CO, C18O, as well as 3-to-2 transitions of, for example, HCN, HNC, H2O+, N2H+, etc. And as you can see, these higher J observations targeted a slightly smaller field of view than the LEGO survey, so speaking about 70 times 60 parsec. Because these observations were designed to match the LEGO data before, they share the same spatial resolution of about 3 parsec, and also in terms of spectral resolution, 0.6 kilometer per second velocity resolution. So in total, we have about 20 molecular species detected, which are commonly categorized into the tracers of the so-called bulk gas, the dense air gas. We already had a great discussion about that, including HCN, HNC, and H2O+, etc. Then we have shock tracers like HCnCO, SiO, and methanol, and then the gold standard, the very cold dense gas tracer N2H+. For today, we will focus on these two categories, which just to make it easier for me to phrase them, I will refer to them as the bulk and the dense gas group. And we have for both of these groups 4 molecules with each 2 transitions, making each group basically consisting of 8 line emissions. And as a very first step, we do an LTE analysis to get a first order approximation for the kinetic temperature and also the column densities of these molecules. And I will just really briefly summarize this here. So we have for each molecule, of course, here is an example shown for C18O, the 1-to-0 and the 2-to-1 transition, the moment 0 maps, and below the 1-to-0 and the 3-to-2 transition of HCN. And for the sake of the later modeling, these integrated intensities here are computed in hexagons of beam size corresponding to 3 parsec. And the hexagons which are shown with which are shown with a lower alpha value are those that do not fulfill the criterion of a signal-to-noise cutoff free, which will be very important later. So when we look at the temperatures, we find in general very low temperatures. So for the C18O, temperatures up to 30 Kelvin in the very bright spot of W49A, and in terms of HCN, even lower, ranging up to 15 Kelvin, especially here in the bright region, they're very, very low. While we find column densities of up to about 10 to the power of 16 for the C18O per centimeter squared, and 10 to the power of 14 for HCN. So of course, when we keep in mind that we just have 2 transitions per each molecule, this is by no means this is by all means just a very rough first approximation, which we use to define our grids later for the modeling. So if we come to that, well, this is huge. We use non-LTE modeling with radix, and for that we compute first of all big grids ranging in the volume density 6 orders of magnitude, temperatures 10 to 150 Kelvin, and for the column densities ranging 8 to 9 orders of magnitude for the bulk and for the dense and for the bulk gas in respective. Then we run for all our molecules and transitions radix grids using the Python wrapper spectral radix on all these possible combinations. And radix returns then multiple line properties, including the integrated intensity. And we can use this integrated intensity combined with our observations to find the best fit using the chi-squared minimization for all of these intensities. And we do this by using the groups that I mentioned before of the 4 molecules with 2 lines each, or up to 2 lines, I should say. And of course, we are working on a beam per beam basis here, which means that we only consider pixels where the degree of freedom must be larger than 0. So that means in our case, to determine the kinetic temperature and the volume density for each group, as well as the column density for each molecule, we have 6 parameters to fit, so we need at least 7 out of the 8 lines detected. So this is one of our results from fitting the emissions of the bulk molecular gas group. Just as an example, again, here is shown the integrated intensity of the 120 CO line. And here are the best fits from k-squared of the kinetic temperatures ranging up to 125 Kelvin, and for the volume densities ranging up to 8,000 per cube centimeter. And we see that the highest values are really reached where in the map we saw before that there is the W49A. So when we do the same analysis on the dense gas tracer group, we first of all see that, as I noticed before, we only do this at all the pixels where we have enough detected lines, which is a much smaller field of view for this group than compared to the bulk group. And we find that in this smaller region, we find very, very low temperatures, around 10 Kelvin across the entire region. While we have very high densities ranging up to the 10 to the power of 6 per cube centimeter. And the question here that comes up, of course, is, are these low temperatures even physical? And if so, does that mean that if we keep in mind that we saw in the bulk gas group temperatures up to 125 Kelvin, does we have multiple gas components in our 3 parsec beam? So to investigate this further, we replace our k-squared minimization with Bayesian inference by using the MCMC sampler EMC and keep the entire workflow the same despite that. But the difference is now that we don't just get the best fit of the physical parameters, but instead we get the entire distribution of these conditions. Again, we are doing this on a pixel per pixel basis. So let's look at one of these very, very bright pixels, which means that we have for both groups all four lines, so all four molecules with all lines detected. So we can really look at all of them here. So on the left, you can see the corner plots showing the 1D and 2D posterior distributions. And in red, you can always see the median exposed from the MCMC, and in blue, the result from the best K-squared fit to compare with. And what we find is that especially the volume density as well as our column densities are well constrained by looking at the distribution function. And we see that they are all relatively close to the values we already found from the K-squared. However, when we look at our temperature here, we find that it again goes to a very, very low value of about 10 Kelvin, but that this is not well constrained at all because the function doesn't decrease at all towards lower values because we are at the range of the lower range of our temperature range. So going to the bulk molecular gas group, thank you, Antonio, doing the same analysis basically here. What we find here is when we look at the temperatures that we have a plateau towards high temperatures. So starting at about 100 Kelvin, it stays constant, which means that our estimate here of, well, about, yeah, a bit below 100 Kelvin is sadly also not too trustworthy. However, we see a decrease on the towards the lower side, which results in a minimum at about 25 Kelvin, which means that with these tracers, we definitely don't trace gas at roughly 10 Kelvin, but much higher. We also see degeneracy between, especially between the volume density and the temperature, as can be seen here. But overall, especially for our column densities, we find again fair agreement of our MCMC fits with the K-squared results. So let me come now to basically discuss these results and bring them in, in perspective, and mostly talk a little about the limits of our methodology here. So let's sum up. While the column densities mostly were well constrained, we saw lots of degeneracies between the temperature and the volume density. These kind of degeneracies, however, are quite common. So for example, in their work from 2017, Vitti et al. Showed that when running huge grids, especially in the lines and in the intensities, as well as in the ratios, these are not unique at all across the grids, which automatically then results in degeneracies in the radix grids. On the other side, we saw that especially for the dense gas group, the temperatures are not well determined at all. So when we look now at the work from the nearby galaxies that we have, we find quite similar problems there. So for example, from 2022, Butterworth et al. Worked on NGC 1068 and used 40 parsec and higher to fit the ratios of HCN, H2O+, and CS. And they also found the problem that they couldn't reasonably constrain the temperatures, neither the volume densities in their case. So my question also to you would be, how or if could we improve the fits that we have? One option would be to say we include further isotopologues, which so far we haven't done so much because we don't have them in our EPEX data. And another option would be to go for higher J observations, because maybe these are needed to constrain the temperature properly. However, even in the work with alchemy, so you probably all know this, which observed the starburst galaxy NGC 253, they have incredible resolution of about 20 parsec and 28 parsec. And they fitted there the CO, HCN, and H2O+ molecules all individually, because they have 3 to 4 transitions each, together with the isotopologues. And I'm showing here on the right some results. Okay, it doesn't want to. Well, on the upper, you can see for one of the regions the result from the H2O plus fit, which was conducted in a very similar way than we did. And in the upper panel, you can see their histogram for the temperatures, which is basically flat. So there's no constraint at all. And similar below for CO, there's no proper constraint. So overall, even when you go to these higher J transitions, it could be that estimating the temperatures remains really tricky. What they discuss in their paper is that it could be that when one involves these high J transitions, one doesn't focus anymore on just one temperature component. One could have two gas components, one traced by the lower J transitions for the lower temperatures and one for the higher. So the question here remains, is there a way, well, what's the best way to proceed? Let me leave you with a quick outlook. Our plan is, as a next step, to expand the work to W43, which we already heard a lot about yesterday. It's very interesting to compare it with W49A because of the different environments. W43 is in the bar end versus W49A in the spiral arm. And one question we have there would be if we come up with the same problem with the temperatures in the dense gas group. And after that, the next idea is to implement chemical modeling using UCLChem to not determine only the physical, but also the chemical conditions to get a, well, hopefully get closer to the full picture. Thank you.
Thanks. Time for a couple of quick questions. Oh, there is one in the Zoom. Okay.
Hi, Minou, can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Great. So very nice talk. I especially like this idea of grouping your species in groups, indeed. And I'm wondering, I mean, your grouping also makes sense from a chemical point of view, but I'm wondering, so since you're not quite finding one consistent solution at the end, I'm wondering if the grouping could maybe not work sometimes. And one way to check this could, for example, be to look how similar the spatial distributions of the emission is within certain groups. So that could be possibly a way out. Have you tried this perhaps? Or did I miss it maybe?
Yeah, so that's a great idea. I presented here just one version we have so far. We went, so it was quite a process over the last 6 months to go to this categorization. So we looked at, regrouping basically, and there will be a long discussion about that in a section of the paper. And we basically really tried to find the best combination here, so to speak. So really looking at whether individual lines or molecules can mess up the entire fit, and this is not the case. So for example, at the bulker, we looked at whether one could exclude the CN or not. What difference does it make? So yeah, I hope this answers the question.
Yeah, very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Floris. No question?
In the case of having multiple temperature components, so associated with different volumes, I guess you might see something in the line widths of the different lines. Have you checked that some of the species, if they have a different volume, they should have a slightly different line width than the more extended ones, for example, or the hotter ones?
So we don't use a constant line width, but we really use it on a pixel per pixel basis on the observations. So this should be, I guess, accounted for that.
But between the different transitions and the lines?
Yes.
So you have a different line width per...
Yeah.
And do you see differences in the line width between the high J transitions and the lower J transitions?
Yes, but I would have to look into it to quantify that really. That's a very interesting approach. Yes, thank you.